that what you want?
Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much. We are here, TrueHoop TV Live. There's David Thorpe, and luckily we joined today from actual live New York City quarantine. Prim, Surfer Pat. Prim, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm quarantined in my bedroom right now. And our apartment building just told us that they have to shut off the water. So I came in to wash my hands.
What?
And my husband was like, don't touch the water. As if like things could not be any more hectic right now. So I'm totally fine. I have a gallon of antibacterial stuff. So, got my.
What is the reason for this water thing?
I don't know. All I know is like I was coming up the street. There was a line all around the block at Trader Joe's. There's 2 police cars and 2 ambulances at the building next to me. And then now the water is being shut off in our apartment. I just think that like this is having such a crazy trickle down snowball effect that it's literally affecting everything that we do right now.
Oh, it's super weird. Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you because you were so nice. I tweeted, I think on Friday or something, like, what do we learn from all this? Like, what does this mean? And people tweeted various things that they spent 9 seconds on. You made a video, which was very thoughtful. So let me put you on the spot and ask you to sort of tell us, what do we learn from this so far?
Well, I also have a lot of time at home. So I was like, you know what, this would be good to answer Henry in person. But I thought it was better to do a video because it needed a little bit more explanation. But very simply, my answer and the lesson from all of this has nothing to do with the political ramifications or the scientific or medical involvement that we're seeing right now, but just coming at it from a philosophical and also psychological perspective. I think.
Sorry, just interrupt you here. You have an advanced degree in.
Yeah. Counseling psychology. So I recently got my master's in counseling psychology, and I'm about to start my doctorate for counseling psychology. Well, that's to be seen. Maybe it'll be online. I don't know, but
seriously.
But
it will be for some time.
But it's something I'm very passionate about. But just talking about just the psychological aspect of all of this, I really think the lesson is to show us how connected we are as a society, and not just here in the United States, but worldwide, globally, and also how deeply intertwined we all are. And additionally, how much we really depend on one another. And, I just kind of said in that video, like something physical, a disease like this is easy to show us the example and the power of something called the ripple effect, which I'm sure everybody understands. But it's almost just like when you throw a rock in a pond in a body of water, and you can see the continuous current of ripples. And this is a really good example. You might have heard of the patient 31 in South Korea, how the first 30 patients, they essentially contained the coronavirus, but all because of that patient 31 who was irresponsible, they are now responsible for 80% of the cases. And at least for me, I like to find meaning in things like this. And I think if we are to learn from this and really adjust our behaviors and realize that not just our actions, but our ideas and attitudes, thoughts, behaviors, how we treat each other, affect people directly and indirectly, I think we would be really better served and can come away from this better.
Can you give me like just a quick, really concrete example day to day of like how you would apply that?
Yeah, so I think, so for example, for myself, just a normal human being in society, I live in New York City. So if I go to the gym, I think a lot of it is a professor and scientist said, the best way to approach this is not to approach this in a sense that you are avoiding it. Assume that you already have it. And that's immediately going to change your behavior. So if I go to the gym, I immediately wipe down everything that I'm doing. If I go to Trader Joe's and I'm waiting over there, it's just about being nice to people. So we get there at 7:30 in the morning. Apparently it opens at 9. And so I hear that. I turn to the person. I'm like, hey, do you know that it's open at 9 a.m.? So then there's just like this teamwork effect. And I'm like, hey, Dags is open. D'Agostino's is open. Why don't we go ahead and do that? And it's just like merely just really being nice to everybody and being kind. And while myself, I will admit that this is probably the first day that I'm panicking a little bit, primarily because New York City's public schools are shutting down. Restaurants and bars, everything is shutting down by 9 a.m. tomorrow, which means that we won't have daycare. We will have to be home. Of course, my husband and I are going to have to manage to work somehow through all of this and take care of our kids, and also having to find resources. But getting back to your question, I think it's just about like being really responsible yourself, being kind, being patient, despite all the panic that you might be experiencing right now.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, David, you want to go? Give us your what do we learn from this so far?
Yeah. Well, a lot. I just learned a lot to listen to Prim talk, so I thank you for that. There's a long list. I won't go but just one. I was born in 1965, which means
This sounds
there
like it's gonna
was
be
a
long.
ton. I'm an old man. There was a ton of Holocaust survivors that I used to see and hear from frequently at Sunday school growing up as a Jewish guy and Jewish. I was more Jewish then than now. Um, and every Jewish person knows, every Jewish person knows the saying "never again." It's very much part of our culture growing up. And I didn't think about it when I was younger, but as I've gotten older and you see things like Schindler's List, and you realize that there were just millions of Jewish Germans, also just regular Germans that weren't Jewish, as well as Jews from around Europe, who just couldn't go there. Oh, it's not going to be so bad. Yes, they've restricted movement, or they've frozen funds, or they've even taken some of our funds, or whatever. But it's not going to be so bad until it tipped, and we know what happened. And what's shocking to me is that as humans, it's our species, we just still can't embrace the idea that really terrible things can happen, whether you're religious or not. And if we want to just depend on religious leaders, we know that's a huge mistake. If we want to just depend on government, very often that's a mistake too. And so it kind of goes to exactly what Prim was saying. At some point, we have to teach our children, and we have to challenge ourselves to act responsibly, regardless of what's happening around us, from positions of quote unquote leaders. It's not just about politics or religion, it's ultimately a personal choice. I was ridiculed by my lovely neighbors on Friday when the dinner party we had planned to go to for my neighbor's birthday. I just told my wife, we're not going. Like at some point, someone has to say no. You can come over. We can control our environment here. These are people that could walk next door. We can make sure we all keep our space, but I'm not going to a restaurant yet. I don't know about in 2 weeks from now, but I can handle 14 days of not going anywhere publicly, and especially a crowded place like that, until we have a little bit better idea. I'm not just going to listen to other people say, oh, it's fine, it's fine. Again, I'm a Jewish man. I know there was once a period in my grandparents' life where it wasn't fine. And so we need to recognize that terrible things have always happened to our species. And if we don't start acting responsibly, bad things will happen to us too. We have to have some kind of ownership of that and not just rely on other people. And in fact, we need to be leaders ourselves and breathe spirit into the hearts and minds of others to do the same so we all can do better often and be able to continue to live.
Thanks, David. I want to. I'll answer the question quickly too. I'm going to quote you, David, which is Ethan Sherwood-Strauss wrote this story last week about how the NBA was kind of, I mean, ultimately a wonderful leader in doing what needs to be done, but initially was terrible, right? And there were these days of games. I mean, the real sort of like there were 2 games at Chase Center in San Francisco where there was a sign saying basically you enter this at your own risk and you may be at elevated risk for COVID-19. Like if you're putting that on a sign, Jesus, you are failing the David Thorpe test of it's hard to be perfect, but it's not hard to be decent, right? Like, and I do think that there's 100 books you could buy in the bookstore right now about like what's wrong with America and right and left and blah, blah, blah. Like, I do think it's this decency test is the right one, right? Like, is that what you can tie yourself in knots with like, who's evil and who's not, forget all that. Like, just like, do what you think is decent, right? Like you, Prim, in line at Trader Joe's, right? Like, turn and say hello and, build some camaraderie. I think it matters, right? So yeah, to me, I've been thinking about this a lot, is just decency. It seems so, it makes it seem really easy if we just kind of do what we think is decent.
I love what Prim said. I think it's super important that when she was quoting the doctor who said, just assume you have it. It's exactly what I told my kids who went out to the beach, which is a very safe place. They're not hugging. It's very sunny. The virus can't survive out there, all of that. They're going in the water. All that's really good. But they're sharing a car with people. So I have banned them from, luckily, we don't live in a beautiful city like New York City, we live in a suburb where we have some space, and they're banned. There's one side of the house for 18-year-olds, and then the rest of us that are adults can go to the other side of the house. And I told them, just assume you have it. Because in sports, we always have to assume they're going to make the shot. In golf, I can't speak for tennis, but I'm guessing it's the case. Expect them to make the green. In golf, you always expect your opponent to make the big putt. So you're dealing with it. In basketball, always expect, you hear coaches all the time say, come on, one time for a miss or a make, because you're always expecting the worst. So if we just all assumed that we have it, no, let's be decent from here on in, and that way it won't spread, because every one person we don't spread it to has a huge ripple effect, down the road, obviously.
Sure.
I mean, I think a lot of this is also, if we're using sports as an example and the greatest metaphor for life. I mean, a lot of this is exercising discipline as well, right? Because it's all about like, well, I really want to go out and have a good meal, or I want to go see, my husband's grandfather is 92 years old. Should we go out to Jersey and check up on him? But, a lot of this is also not just discipline, but really learning how to process some of this information, educate yourself, and know how to filter some of the misinformation out there, because there's a lot of misinformation out there right now. And what I'm finding is a lot of even very highly educated people that have access to a lot of the information, they themselves are not absorbing some of this important information. Like even my parents, who are highly academic people, but even they were like, yeah, you have to be really careful, because this is, the elderly and really young kids are very much prone to exposure for this. And while they got half of it right, and that's not to say that children are immune to it, but so far under the age of 9, kids, they have found that it's literally, the coronavirus is literally bouncing off of them.
How is that possible?
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's almost like their immune system is like the modern day immune system, where they are very much equipped to handle these new viruses and diseases.
That's amazing.
And so I think a lot of it is educating yourself, really knowing the symptoms. The symptoms, while they may start as a cold or flu, everyone's going to range differently. But the biggest symptoms would be high fever. I spoke to some medical officials here in New York City. High fever, pretty much minimum of 103 degrees, and it stays high even after you treat it with Tylenol or Advil. Number 2 is coughing, and so it might start with a coughing, which then turns into shortness of breath. And number 3 is complete disorientation. There was an article out there about 40-something-year-old man, very healthy, and it got to the point where he was like sitting on the bathtub just talking to himself, like, so complete disorientation.
Wow.
And I think long story short, really educating yourself about what to look out for and how to prevent this.
So we're going to want to take some questions. If you put them in the chat, we have a new protocol we're trying to use. It's fun to have your questions by video. So if you want to be on video, not all of you do, then just write your question in the chat by clicking the little chat button, and then write the word video in all caps with your question if you would like it to be asked that way. I want to talk to you guys quickly before we start taking questions, though. Donovan Mitchell is in isolation after testing positive for coronavirus. He talked this morning to Robin Roberts on one of the morning shows and said he has no symptoms. He feels like he could play a 7-game series right now. But what really got my attention was, and I wrote the quote down here, she asked about Rudy Gobert, his teammate who also tested positive and famously wasn't following all the protocols beforehand.
He's flagrantly not following the protocols.
Flagrantly not following protocols. And Donovan Mitchell said, to be honest with you, it took a while for me to cool off, which I thought was interesting. What do you make of that?
Well, I've tweeted this. Henry, I've talked to you about this going back well over a year ago. Rudy's an immature guy. I've compared him to DeMarcus Cousins light because he doesn't get technicals every game like DeMarcus. But he's just a really immature guy, and players have been sick of him for a long time. If I'm aware of it, going back well over a year ago, other people should be too. It's just not the biggest sin in the world normally. Like we all have friends that are a little more immature than they should be at their age. This took a turn for the worse. And I remember George Karl telling me one time that he was convinced DeMarcus Cousins would grow up one day. He just said, I just don't think it'll happen while I'm coaching in Sacramento. And he was right, for more than one reason. This is going to change Rudy forever, who's already the best defense player on the planet, in my opinion. his story is incredible on the court. Well, now he needs to catch up off the court. And as I said to you off air, I have no idea who gave what to whom. You made a point. Someone probably could figure that out. It doesn't matter to me. Rudy acted very irresponsibly on more than one occasion. And there's going to be some issues there. But the last thing I'll say on that subject is we've been at war with countries that are now our closest allies. Two people should be able to work this out for the betterment of their franchise and their careers, because together they're dynamic, but it doesn't mean they will. Like it's going to take work. They're going to need to get therapists and counseling or professionals to unite that group, because this is a major thing. And I'll just add, sports has such a huge impact on our culture. And Prim is kind of talking about the value of it. This is what, and all of this that we're going through now started with Rudy Gobert's positive test. The NCAA's admitted they were going to play if it wasn't for Rudy, right? Think about what's going on globally. Once the NBA cut down, all my players overseas, all their leagues are done. None of that was happening. Games were scheduled with fans in some cases until Rudy tested positive. So Tom Hanks, Rita Wilson, Rudy Gobert, we'll never forget that night. And I just hope they all recover totally normal going forward. And we need to hear from that. I'm glad to hear Donovan was asymptomatic. We need to hear that Rudy and Rita and Tom are okay, because people are holding their breath. We need them to breathe and think they're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Prim, I want to ask you, I don't know if you saw those pictures from like South Padre Island where it's spring break and like it's absolutely situation normal, right? And there's thousands of people. Or I know there was a lot of upset. Even AOC tweeted basically like, guys, stop going out and partying in New York, right? On Saturday. There's something about, I honestly was like, this might be a prefrontal cortex thing, right? Where like you're like it's not fully developed till you're 27 or whatever, right? I'm like, there seems to be something with young people having a harder time just cottoning on to the fact that this matters.
Yeah, well, actually, one of your fans, Randy Shane, I don't know if you want to read it, but he's basically asking the same thing. But he says, I work with a ton of 20 to 28-year-olds, and some of them are decidedly nonchalant about Corona. Do you think NBA players, most of whom are in this age range, understand the seriousness, or are they similar to the average person their age? And that's exactly what I've been talking about with a lot of my friends and colleagues in the area. I think the thing that struck me about Rudy and also Donovan is, number one, Rudy, he is young and immature and inexperienced. And a lot of that has to do with also, he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have kids, I don't believe. And so with that, you just don't have the wisdom and maturity and also the perspective to understand how your behaviors really impact everybody. And for part of me wants to say, like, I understand it, because when I was 20 or 22 years old, I was a complete dumb idiot. I thought I was impenetrable and nothing could touch me or take me down. So I think that's just like the really dangerous thing is Rudy had no idea the severity of the situation. He had no idea the ramifications of his behavior. And then we take Donovan's situation and somebody who is asymptomatic, but he could then affect and really spread this disease and impact somebody. And he's being responsible. So there's so many different lessons that we can take from this. But yeah, I think the biggest problem is going to, I hate to really point the finger at a demographic or a group, but it's going to be the young 20-something to maybe early 30s who might be single, and they are using this time, they're getting a little antsy sitting at home. I mean, we were just dealing with it in our apartment building on Saturday night. The people down the hallway were having a party until 4 a.m, and people were running in and out, drinking, smoking, whatever else. And we live in the Upper West Side, which is generally like a very family-friendly neighborhood. And so to answer the question, unfortunately, I think it is going to be that demographic that they're really going to have to step up. And I don't know what we're going to have to do to help control some of that recklessness.
I want to address Randy's question on regarding to the NBA players, because I talked to some literally one was 26. I've got 29, 30, 28, a lot of guys that I've talked to. And unlike your neighbors, and I think this is true of athletes in general, Rudy's obviously an exception to some degree, they understand, well, they've all been injured. Like, they understand they're not impenetrable. Most of them do, right? And so they're frustrated that they're rich and some of them famous and they're quarantined. Like the Jazz players are all quarantined and only 2 have tested positive so far. They could have picked it up that day, right? That's why even if they tested negative, they're still, everyone's under quarantine. I think the Raptors all tested negative and they're under quarantine because they played Utah on Monday night. In fact, I went and watched the game just to see how many times Rudy Gobert grabbed people, touched the ball and passed it for both teams.
Yeah.
And
counted them
referees
up.
too.
It's a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot, right. Like Siakam had more contact and Ibaka than any of the Jazz players did with Rudy in the first half. But I think that they recognize more so than the average young person, I'm guessing anyway, based on things. I mean, I saw a picture of Disney World. It's just crazy to me that they haven't got it. I think the athletes get it more. And they also realize they want to go back to playing. So someone's done a good job explaining that if we all just lay low, we have a much better chance to get back to some kind of normalcy much more quickly than if we act as if everything's going to be fine. So I think Randy's question is good, and the NBA players get it better, in part because they're the ones who broke it. Rudy broke it in a sense. So I think that they're not going to be out and about, and I wish everyone would follow.
I'll tell you what else was on my mind with Rudy being, a goofball. Really, he's paying a big price for being a goofball.
Yeah, it's just a goofy.
And Royce Webb and I, ESPN NBA editor Royce Webb and I used to talk about, basically he's like, look, by the time you get to be LeBron in the NBA, right, skipping college, like every single advisor he ever had was wrong. Like he's outperformed every model, right? Every teacher who was like, oh, you have to study really hard or you won't pass the test. If you don't pass the test, you won't get into college. If you don't go to college, you won't get a job, right? Like all the conventional advice, LeBron's like, see ya, right? Like he's the best player in the world on a path that no one's ever walked before, right? Like he went his own way from St. Vincent St. Mary to the Cleveland Cavaliers to the finals, and all just really fast, which means the history for him of people saying, hey, if you don't do X, then Y, it doesn't apply to him. It never has, right? So it wouldn't be weird for me that Rudy Gobert, who comes from France to the best defensive player in the NBA, like he's encountered a lot of advice. He's just been like, whatever. You guys are always saying it's dangerous or don't do it or it's too hard or whatever. And I've never listened to any of you and look at me now, right? I think that's a little bit of, it's like a superhero complex that develops out of that would be not unusual.
It's funny because you talk about the superhero complex, and I think that's what I was actually talking to Al Harrington. He was in New York, and he came on my show, and he pointed out like the thing that makes elite athletes really special is you kind of have this unreasonable, unrealistic, overinflated view of your skills and your abilities in life, and that's what allows you to tear down all those naysayers and doubters. And as you mentioned, LeBron James and the teachers telling all these other athletes like, no, if you don't study, you're not going to get into college, you're never going to be somebody. But while that may be the strand that allows them to find success in what they do in the area of sports, that is also the thing that actually hurts them sometimes in scenarios like this, where they then apply the same mentality and they're like, well, this coronavirus thing, it's not going to touch us. It's not going to touch me. And if I do get it, I'm a baller. I'm strong. I'm 6'8". I'm 250, 300 pounds. Like I'm going to conquer this thing. And that's where things get very dangerous, because as we have seen, no one is immune to something like this.
There's a testosterone part of this. Like a different version of this conversation is like, hey, you better wash your hands. And there's a research from all over the world that men just don't wash their hands very much. Actually, Judy, who can hear us right now, Judy and I had this conversation the other day where I was like, Judy, when you go in a public bathroom, what percentage of women wash their hands? And she's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And she's like, well, if I'm there, it's 100%, but I don't know what it would be if I wasn't there, right? And I'm like, well, I'm here to tell you that in the men's room, when I'm there, it's like 50%.
It's so gross. Oh my God.
So
gross.
And all over the world.
Never go into New York City again.
It's so
New Jersey.
And all over the world, men are getting this virus more, like presumably spreading this virus more, right? And just haven't been washing their hands for decades, right? I do think there is a testosterone part of that, like that armor thing you're talking about where you feel invincible. Like,
yes.
It seems like testosterone might be fueling that. And it's the same thing, baseball players talk about when they were doping and their testosterone is elevated, they also feel like invincible at the plate. And that was a significant mental advantage, right? And like this is helpful if you're doing the right thing. It's very
Randy's funny. Randy and Judy are both very funny.
Randy, you're banned.
Oh,
Randy's a
Wait,
friend.
you didn't answer the question, Henry. So which 50% are you?
Henry's a washer.
I'm the son of a doctor. Like
Right.
I was raised that washing your hands is like we were iffy on God, but we definitely washed our hands.
God, question mark. Washing hands? Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Guaranteed.
Hell yeah. We'd be like I mean, my dad was like a total snob on this point, like, you know, to his credit now, but we'd be in some public bathroom and like somebody would like not wash their hands and like they wouldn't even be out of earshot. My dad would be like, "Oh, that's just terrible." Like,
Love your dad already.
That's a great guy. I got my backup hand sanitizer right here. Yeah, when I was at the Sloan conference last weekend, I was just like, "Ooh, I've been out of the bathroom for 7 minutes. Time to go wash my hands again."
Oh my gosh, the Sloan conference. You know what's so crazy right now is that was only 2 weeks ago? Time is moving. That was only
That was
like
1 week ago.
That's it? 1 week ago?
A week and a
Time
few
is
days,
moving
yeah.
so fast right now, right? Everything is happening. You pick up your phone. I think it was, what night was it? It was Friday night. I put the phone down for 4 hours. I come out of it. The NBA is canceled. Was it Tom Hanks and Rita had coronavirus, and then something else happened. It's just things are happening so quickly. But you know, what made me think about, since we're in the basketball conversation, it made me think about the ACC conference tournament and how important it is for people to not only be responsible, but also take this opportunity to be leaders as well. I was reading an article about, you know, how Duke and Kansas were the first two to kind of pull themselves out of the equation before the NCAA did anything. And they were set to start the ACC tournament that day. NC State was about to take the court. Duke University president, Vincent Price, went in there and was like, "I'm pulling Duke out. We're canceling athletics for the rest of the spring, championships, whatever." And he was the one that felt the need to really put his foot down and make sure that they are a role model, because Duke is, you know, one of the leaders in research and science and the medical field as well. And he said no when the ACC said we were going to move forward, and when all the other 14 school presidents were on board to continue moving forward with this. And that is really scary. But as when he pulled the plug and Kansas pulled the plug, the dominoes fell after that. And I think that's just going to be a really important thing for people to do.
It made me, yes. I thought about something similarly. What if Adam Silver wasn't the NBA commissioner? And I'm not going to go into politics too much. I think all three of us probably align very similarly because we're pro people, all people. If the wrong person's commissioner, can you just imagine them saying, "Well, let's just sit out Rudy. He's not playing, and everything's fine." Like, and then there would have been a fight because some of the more advanced thinking teams would have complained. Others would have said, "No, it'll be okay." I don't think Adam Silver tried to convince the Jazz and the Thunder you should play. I think he quickly acted. Thank goodness for that, because that's the domino. You know, you always have that first domino fall, and it did. And we're thank goodness, because every day that we move closer towards really having a physical distance, the quicker we can get back to our normal life again.
It's funny. Like there is a natural human tendency to just say yes to the thing that makes you money. And it doesn't make you evil. I think we all kind of like if you're, I don't know, if you wait tables at a restaurant right now, part of you's gonna be like, open the restaurant, right? Like you're gonna feel that way. It's okay to feel that way. But I think if you're in the position of deciding whether or not the restaurant should be open, you have to just put on your calmer hat, right? And think like that. I thought Adam Silver got it wrong. For a few days there, I missed David Stern. I was like, David Stern would be willing to piss off more people. Like, David Stern is like, hell yeah, I'll shut down your league. Your ad owners call me. Like, for a while, I was like, maybe Adam Silver's too much of a consensus builder. He is a consensus builder. Like, he's really into like checking in with everyone and making sure it's right. And for a few days there, I was like, what are you doing, Adam? Like, time to stop building consensus. Time to just piss everybody off and just do it. And then, you know, thankfully, in a way, we had a real hard and fast reason.
Henry, you predicted it. You didn't predict Rudy's positive test. That day you told me you suspect tonight's going to be the last night the NBA plays games. You said that to me on the phone.
Vegas.
Yeah. So this is your point, is maybe Stern would have shut it down before Wednesday.
And we were all surprised before. Like Zach Lowe, I don't think would mind me telling you, he emailed I published something on like Friday from Sloan being like, whoa, this feels like we're all in denial about coronavirus, even having Sloan. And then on Sunday, so there was a game Friday night in Boston. Everybody at Sloan went to the NBA game. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to go to an NBA game right now. I just didn't want to. I went to dinner with one friend. And then on Sunday, there was another Boston game. And Zach emailed me from there. He's like, yeah, this just feels stupid. Like, it just feels stupid. And I was like, from that point, I don't know what the day was, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, somewhere in there. It just seemed like all of these games must stop. This is when the Warriors were playing with the warning on the door. And I just felt like,
I didn't understand like the whole initial move to keep the fans out and then let the players play, because I'm like, there was just like this elitist attitude. It was like, so what? We just think the fans are disgusting people that have all these illnesses and diseases, like, and then the players are, you know, they're sweating over each other and climbing over each other, bumping, you know, shaking hands, high-fiving, having such close contact with each other in the locker room and everything else. Like, what? In the beginning, it just didn't make sense to me.
It was so clearly divided into like some people who are more valuable and need protection, and other people who are less valuable and don't need protection. Like, it seems so bad. Actually, interesting point though. When Rudy famously touched the microphones, at that time, this is important. So Andy Larson was one of the journalists who was there, and he said on Twitter, he's like, look, remember that then I'm putting way ton of words into his mouth, but this is the basic point. Was the idea was that journalists were going to get players sick, and so they separated the journalists away from the players. And so he's like, we all took it as a sign of Rudy being really nice. Like, I'm not scared of you guys. I wish you were closer. So like Rudy was like, I'll take the risk of crazy, dangerous Andy Larson, right? Little did we all know that, of course, Rudy was coronavirus carrier at that time. Anyway, yeah, that was interesting.
Questions, like, Henry? You want to get some questions? We got some questions. You want answers?
We do have questions. All right. Wait, Greg, you don't want to ask this on video? Is that what I'm getting from this? Greg's got two good questions. So I'll assume he doesn't. First of all, Greg played pickup yesterday with no drives allowed, all outside shots, no offensive rebounds. I've been thinking a lot about how do you exercise, how do you go outdoors in this time. And Gerard, a friend of ours who's here, also immediately said, no, this is a respiratory thing, can't play pickup. What's your take?
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I asked this
question. What are you doing here?
I asked you this question last week. I asked you, if you breathe on the ball and then you shoot, can the virus go from you to the ball, from the ball to the rim? Then someone else rebounds the ball. Can the virus then go from back to the ball to your hands? And obviously the virus can stay on the ball when you rebound it. Or the next person who comes in after you, if you just shoot by yourself, can the virus stay on the rim? Did it bounce from the ball? I don't know these answers.
Or the floor, or the doorknob, or the bathroom, or every other surface, right?
Right. I mean, you can clean up all those things, but you can't clean the ball every time you touch it, and you can't clean the rim. Someone has to go up there and do that. That's asking a lot, especially if you're at a park, whatever. So I know with my son, we're not too worried about an outdoor rim. It's in the sun, and it's 85 degrees today. But he's going to use his own ball starting today, because he's done nothing until then, and no one else, just him by himself. Maybe even start tomorrow, actually. But yeah, there'll be I know overseas they are doing some team practice stuff, but no contact. But no one's symptomatic, but Donovan Mitchell isn't either. So I don't think it's smart for them to do that, but that's what they were doing as of yesterday. Still is practicing, but no screening, no competitive action, just walking through stuff, doing conditioning. I have a feeling that's going to be shut down for a couple of weeks too.
I would say the answer to all of that is just going to have to mean no. You have to stay away from that. So information right now, obviously we don't have a vaccine, and research is ongoing right now. We're probably 6 to 8 months, maybe a year from developing a vaccine. And information is changing. They said in the beginning that the virus can stay on surfaces. In the beginning, they said maybe 30 seconds to maybe several minutes, but that's changing. But what we do know right now is that the liquid particles, so for example, if you sneeze, if you cough, something comes out of your mouth, that is how things are transmitted. So even if you are playing pickup ball and you're not touching each other, if somebody happens to sneeze or it gets on their hand, it transfers over to somebody else and it enters through your eyes, your nose, or your mouth. That is how you get sick.
Right.
And so with all that, that's why people are saying make sure you wash your hands and don't touch your face. I forgot what people said, like the average person touches their face several hundred times a day. And so I would just say to any sort of activity, like you got to cut it out, or Yeah.
This face touching thing is big, right? I mean, it is literally like the key step. I'm I'm a lifelong huge face toucher. I cannot stop touching it. But that's actually the one benefit of going to the Sloan conference was like we were all from like the second I left my house to when I was like thought maybe it was stupid. Not following my own advice here, but I went. And the whole way I was like, Henry, don't touch your damn face. and I was on stage. I was on in front of all these people. So everybody would, every now and again, I'd see someone. We'd all be like, "Oh, that guy just touched his face." Actually, Donovan Mitchell in his interview with Robin Roberts was like touching his face. I'm like, Donovan, come on. But I got a crash course. I feel like it's now habit. Like because I went to the Sloan conference of a weekend of just like absolutely don't touch your face. Like I'm thankful for this one thing, which is I had to learn it now, and now I think I can do it. It's weird.
Ditto.
Maybe I'll never get sick again.
I am in I didn't realize it until before. I was like, oh my gosh, I touch my face all the time. Sometimes I'll put my hand, right there, and I'll just kind of like
all the time.
Whatever. Like I need to cut that out.
I did read, so there's a great article published this morning in The Atlantic where Franklin Foer interviewed the person at Mass General who's in charge of preparing Mass General's response for the coronavirus. And very serious interview, very serious stuff. But he did say that he thought that getting outside and exercising was actually very important. And he recommended like jogging or a couple of things. He was like, 3 to 6 feet between everybody. And if anybody's coughing, you have to stay home. So I think that kind of, Greg, answers your question. He didn't say anything about pickup basketball special rules. He said, like jogging. I went mountain biking with my son yesterday, and I have to admit, it felt great. It felt delightful. We didn't touch anybody. We were with some friends, but we just, I think maybe there was like 1 or 2 elbow taps. Mostly we were mountain biking. You're 30 feet away from everybody most of the day, and being in the sun.
Yeah.
Outdoors felt just like, it's so much better to be socially isolated when you're socially isolated in the middle of the woods. It feels great sometimes.
I made a commitment. We were lucky to live 15, 20 minutes away from the #1 beach in the world. I think 2 of the last 3 years, Clearwater Beach. It's an amazing place. Normally, we would never, ever go this time of year because of spring break.
Yeah.
It's not my kids are there all weekend, and you can go like the bridges that get you there aren't so crowded. So we're going to try to walk 4 miles. We walk a lot anyway, 4 miles a night, and then watch sunset down the sand. It's the safest place we can be. We know the beach well. We'll stay away from the tourist areas, and we'll go to the private beach parts where it's public, but no one goes there because they don't know where to park. And just to feel sane. Like just to get out again. And I think more people will do what you did, Henry, or we're going to do, just enjoy nature as best you can, just not in big groups. I do worry about one thing though. My wife is supposed to work tomorrow. She's volunteered in the past for the polls for elections. And they hired her this year for a whole $150. She's going to be a poll worker tomorrow for the Florida primary. And she is loaded up with alcohol stuff because she doesn't trust they'll have it. I don't know how they haven't canceled it. They're hoping no one comes. I know we dropped our ballots, and actually today it's happening. But how are they doing that? I told my wife I'm gonna have to go to the beach without you for the next 2 weeks. You might be in quarantine.
Well, everybody who works in grocery stores and stuff, right? The same kind of risk. It's real. People have jobs to do. And I guess, look, the thing with the election, right, is if elected governments get in the habit of canceling or postponing elections, like it's a slippery slope to dictatorship.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I think Florida's doing some electronic stuff online for the first time. That could be crazy, but they're really trying to get people just to do the ballots, drop them off, and we were doing that anyway. But hopefully, I know my wife's gonna keep her distance and wipe down everything nonstop and stay away from anyone that doesn't look the part that may be coughing or anything.
Yeah.
By the way, going back to the conversation about what could people do for working out right now, especially if like our gym just announced that they're closing here in the New York City area. So everything's shutting down now. Definitely go outside. You could walk, you could run. You could also do a HIIT training, which is high intensity interval training. So for example, if you're looking to stay in shape, which me and my husband, like, we're going to go nuts here for the next couple of weeks, not having access to a gym. So what you could do is 30 minutes. It's similar to like a Tabata training, but it's 30 minutes. You pick maybe four different activities, do it for 30 seconds, as fast as you can, as hard as you can, 15-second rest, move on to the next activity. So the first one might be squats with a little weight. Do that for 30 seconds as hard, as fast as you can, 15-second rest. Second one, push-ups. Third activity, you could do, wall sits. And fourth one, you could do something ab or a medicine ball, throwing it on the ground or something like that, just to give something for people to do, very short, high intensity, and that'll keep you in shape for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we're all been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. All right, so Greg has another question about the WNBA, Basketball Africa, NBA India. These are leagues under the NBA's umbrella. How worried should we be about them in these times?
I don't know for sure, but I don't think anything in the NBA is happening for quite a while. I'm sure they don't want to cancel it, but for WNBA anyway, are there any cases reported yet in Africa or India? I've not paid attention.
Yes.
There are. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to be global either way.
Yeah.
I know humidity helps. Obviously, the sun kills the virus, but humidity makes it harder for the virus to be passed. It tends to be pulled down. The weight of the water pulls it down to the ground. But still, if there's, you can't be congregating with people anywhere. I think to me the bigger question is, when can we? Like, what globally has to happen? What's the signal to allow people to start going on subways and everything again at normal rates? We know.
So David, you're thinking about like opening stadiums again. I think Greg's talking about the business, right? So I think those are three money losing entities.
Yeah.
Right. So the NBA is taking a giant hit. They're obviously going to put the turbo on the revenue generating NBA getting back up to speed, but will they bother to bring back the ones that lose money is a fair question, right? So to me, I think it probably matters like how profoundly.
Excuse me.
That was good.
Oh no!
That's good thing.
Right in your elbow. You were good.
See how I did the elbow?
I saw it.
And the dive roll was a nice touch. Yeah. But I think it's like, how profoundly do the owners believe in the business strategies of these things, right? Are they giving money to the WNBA because they think they want to look good? Which I think is probably true in the case of some of these people who own NBA teams who are terrible on issues of gender, right? The worst. Or are they doing it because they actually really believe that it's an important part of the NBA's future? Like, we're going to find out, right? We're going to find out soon.
You're the owner watcher, Henry, for the country right now for the NBA. How many have stepped up to do what at least I think 4 or 5 NBA players have done?
Oh, David, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and started writing about that.
I didn't know that, but I'm not at all surprised.
I'm underwhelmed by, so this little, there was a social media thing, right, which is like, oh, who's supporting the arena workers, right? And like Rudy Gobert gave $500,000 and a number of teams. I don't know. I probably got
Kevin Love, Donovan Mitchell, Zion, 6 figures.
Yeah.
What owners have done anything?
A lot. I think it's unclear exactly what they have contributed, but we've seen press releases from like the Pelicans, the Hawks, the Mavs, the several more. I think the Warriors. Exactly how that works and how much money is getting people and where it comes from is hard to say. But I guess I'm feeling like, I'm writing about this. It's mostly done. I'll probably publish it later today or tomorrow. The billionaires who, the NBA Board of Governors are extremely connected and formative in how our whole world is, right? Like, whether or not we have globalized health insurance is something they have weighed in on heavily, right? They're part of the reason that we don't, et cetera, et cetera. Not all of them, right? But they can pull strings that we can't pull, right? And so to me, what are we doing right now to make this crisis better? Like, I'm worried about arena workers, but I think they have a scope of influence that's like 1,000x arena workers. And I want to hear about that, right? I want to hear about like really meaningful things. In Wuhan, they had, one of the first things that happened was the emergency rooms were so crowded, you couldn't even get a seat to sit in while you're getting an IV while you have coronavirus. You have to stand, right? So then they you've probably seen the pictures. They like populated the floor of they call it the sports center, but really it's a stadium, right? It was just covered in it's kind of like it's like a cube farm, really, but like it's a hospital, right? So they were in the sports stadium. It's entirely, and like Joe Biden called for militarizing field hospitals, right? Putting field hospitals everywhere. We just need capacity. So these NBA owners have 29 arenas, which I guess could be used, but also millions of square feet of other space, right?
Yeah.
All these closed casinos, all these closed restaurants, all these closed whatever. Let's hear it, guys. Like, wouldn't it be nice for your local hospital to get a call from you saying, like, hey, if you need more space,
It's a really good idea.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it could happen that it's within the bounds of what happens in pandemics that the government would just seize these kinds of places. But anyway, yes, to your question, I have a whole essay written that we're going to soon on this kind of stuff.
I would have been disappointed if you didn't. I've been worried that you already have disorientation because that's your natural inclination is to hold them to the fire.
There's one other thing here, which is I think that the NBA is really good at treating people like superheroes, like we're talking about before, right? So if you're, let's say, I was listening to CJ McCollum's podcast, right? I've been to the Blazers practice facility. It's beautiful in Tualatin, Oregon. It's like this big building with a high ceiling, and there's very nice people there. When you walk in the front door, you walk in through like where the staff is, and people are just friendly. And if you work there and you want to work on your jumper, extra free throws, whatever, someone's like, hey, let me help you with that. Hey, here we go. And I am willing to believe that does make him perform at a higher level, right? I mentioned Christy Ashwindon last time. She has this little phrase, stress is stress. So like if CJ is really stressed out about like where he can practice free throws, it actually makes him worse at the other things he's trying to be good at. I think a good opportunity for us would be to treat healthcare workers like that now, right? Like,
yeah,
let's make your superheroes now, right? Like, what can we do? How can you amble in so that you feel everything, like someone walked your dog, someone's taking care of your kids, you have fresh, clean clothes, you don't have to worry about laundry, here are the groceries, and like, can we just like turn them into like fully supported, fully empowered superheroes who feel like they can focus on what they need to focus on?
They're the people that are in the line of fire right now. And a lot of the nurses, primarily the nurses, have really been outspoken about the things that they're going through. And they're really nervous about not only contracting it themselves, but passing it on to their families.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's try to take some stress off their plates, right? Like,
yeah.
I just told you the whole essay I wrote, so you don't have to subscribe anymore.
Sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
What's the time? Oh my gosh. I gotta get an easier to read clock. We pretty much used all of our time, but Gerard's here. Gerard, you want to join us? You want to go on video for a second? We don't really want to go a whole 45 minutes without Gerard. Is he available? Is he there? There we go.
I'm here. What's up? Hey, Prim.
Hi. What's going on?
I'm okay. In New York, like you, managing just across the park.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What's up, Coach?
Hello, Gerard. How are you?
Good.
Glad you're doing okay.
You know, Henry, you brought it up. It's so interesting. And David, you started it. Like, why do we constantly choose millionaires to attack versus billionaires in this whole scenario, right? It's like, as a country, we're so anti-union and so anti-anything that's for, like, workers who, when you think about it, these people are more closely identifiable with us than Mark Lazary and Joe Lacob, but yet we constantly root for them versus others. I mean, I have my theories on why that is, but I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I think they're not in the spotlight as
Oh,
much.
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Henry. You're gonna be smarter than me about it.
I was just gonna say the word millionaire. We all grew up with that being like the definition of rich, right? I think our brains haven't expanded yet to like no. like one little way of thinking about it was there's a roaring trade now in like military style private security. So like there are people, individual people who have like little armies.
Yeah.
Right. That to me is a sign that like wealth is out of whack. Right.
Armies and retirement plans in case the world goes to hell.
Yeah.
They're still going to be fine. Like you're starting to read about some of these kinds of things.
Right.
Yeah. That's James Bond, bad guy kind of stuff.
So I don't mind people wanting that or working hard to get that, but it gets a little weird to ask those people to make plans for us. Right? Like, if you have a private army, we're not all on the same page here anymore. Right? Like, you're not very worried about me, right? You're hiring people with guns to keep me away, right? Like, what the hell? Like, yeah,
It's true.
you're not gonna have my solution. Did we get abstract here?
You guys are right on. You guys are right on with that. Like, I'm wondering, like, Virgin Airways laid off a bunch of employees. Haven't heard anything from Richard Branson. Prices on Amazon are skyrocketing through the roof. Jeff Bezos is probably somewhere on his $500 million flying yacht that, like, he doesn't have to worry about this stuff. Like, all these people who literally, because they're so, and it's not even rich, like, they are exponentially wealthy that they can literally self-insulate from this stuff, and it doesn't matter. Like, it's just, to me, again, and I get what you're saying, Henry, about, we understand millionaire and we don't understand billions, but it's part of it too is how we talk about athletes, right? And how the talk show radio aspect of it and how athletes talked about it. And this is something I write about and I talk about all the time. The NBA, for however you want to describe it, this is the black league, and it still has that perception, and people feel a certain type of way, whether they want to say it consciously or not all people, but some people, about black people, particularly young black men with millions of dollars. That makes people feel some kind of way. Whereas billions with a white man doesn't make people feel that same way.
Oh, there's a certain kind of NBA follower, commenter who just is shocked every day that, like, there are black people with lots of money and they just can't get over it. It's like you're gonna have to get over this, guys. Like, this is just gonna be an okay thing. It's gonna be okay. Meanwhile, I really recommend CJ McCollum and Carmelo Anthony, their most recent version of their podcast. They recorded while the news of the season being canceled reached them, and very genuine. I really, really was touched by how both of them were very thoughtful about the whole thing. They immediately talked about meditation, which they both do routinely. And then my son was in the car and he was like, I can't believe how quickly they were talking about money. But, so their salaries are going away, and they immediately went to like all of the very kind of rational thoughts about, like, how are we going to pay for everything in this time, right? And their poorer teammates, etc. But I felt like millionaires at their level are still kind of planning like we do, right? For how they're going to cover bills.
A few steps ahead of us in terms of like a financial perspective. I think that the reason why we can have conversations with the millionaires is because we see it all the time with a lot of these athletes where, they're spending and living a certain life while they're playing, but they're not really having that perspective to prepare for the future. And within several years, I don't know what the stats are with NBA, but you hear that stat about the NFL. Within 3 years, a lot of these players are bankrupt or close to being bankrupt.
Yeah.
And also, I will say that, Gerard, to answer your question, I think that there's a lot more criticism, and I think millionaires and billionaires are a lot more in the spotlight than we think, and we don't have access to those conversations, so it appears that they are insulated in a certain way. And I think they are insulated in a certain way because they have the resources to. But I will say, in doing my show and talking with like dozens and dozens of elite athletes, one thing that comes up in every single conversation is the stress of finances and the lack of trust that comes with having to deal with not just strangers, because everybody knows how much they make, but also family members and people coming out of the woodwork to pretend that they are family members. I had a conversation with Josh Childress, and as we all know, he signed the biggest deal in European basketball history. And he said that he had to become a recluse, and he really struggled with it because it's just a weird thing about being a professional athlete where everybody knows how much money you make. And because everybody knows that you signed a $35 million deal, people are now becoming really good friends with you and saying like, hey, you've got $35 million. Why can't you spot me $5,000? Because
right.
And those are like real.
Let me hold $1 million real quick.
Yeah. And so, I don't think that millionaires or billionaires are immune to any of this. They just live a life that we don't have access to and we don't understand. In talking to these athletes, you hear that saying of like more money, more problems. And it's really true. They're just like different set of problems that we don't know.
This is are you making this point while literally sitting on the floor?
Yes.
See the poetry in that?
I'm like yoga posing it right now. This is what self-quarantining is. My husband gets a whole living room. I'm here next to the dog bed, having my
Listen.
green juice with no water. What's going on here? Like, eat vodka, honestly.
Actually, that's a kind of very proletariat drink there for him.
I feel like vodka in this would be much better served for times like this. It's almost noon. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah. Social isolation is hilarious. All right. Well, that's great. Thank you guys so much. We're back here every day this week at 11. You all are welcome every time. Tomorrow, Ben Cohen from the Wall Street Journal, his book, The Hot Hand, is just coming out, and he's a beautiful, lovely writer. I'm just a little tease thing. He talks about experiencing the hot hand when he was in high school, and there was a moment where he made a fake. He had hit like 3 shots in a row. He made a fake, and then the defender like flew past him, and he wrote that he had enough time to sip a cup of espresso before he took the shot. Anyway, he writes like that. But he'll be here tomorrow, and more guests coming. Prim, Drod, David, thank you guys so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.